Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another video. So we just got the penultimate episode of Andor Season 1, the first of the two-part finale, Episode 11, Daughter of Ferrix. This episode is exactly what I was talking about the other day when I said that this show is the gift that keeps on giving, and you just never know what the next episode has in store. And following such an amazing episode last week, I'm very surprised my expectations were exceeded once again. In my opinion, this was by far the most impactful episode of the season yet, a roller coaster of emotion, poetic, heartfelt, and in terms of themes, it rhymes with Rogue One, especially that heartbreaking ending. What's remarkable about this episode is that following the events of One Way Out, a lot of us expected a fast-paced, action-packed adventure once again, but what they gave us instead was an appropriate second-to-last episode that paid off so much of what they've built in the first 10, while also setting up the final episode in a purely heartfelt and moving style. As always, I'm gonna save my rating for the end of this video, so let's dive straight into the breakdown. Let's begin with the events on Ferrix, where Mother Andor has unfortunately died. She wasn't taking her pills, and she left behind people who admired and loved her. Her rebel spirit will not be forgotten. The impact of her death on those around her is felt throughout all of Ferrix, and the revolt on Ferrix, which was teased in the trailer, is therefore going to be next week. The Imperial spy informs Dedra that the citizens are planning a funeral in 2 days' time. As per the planet's customs, Marva's ashes are going to be mixed with mortar, and she'll basically become a brick in a wall. Dedra, being a controlling fascist, wants to control and limit the time of the procession, which is going to take place on Rick's Road. So what I suspect will trigger the revolution on Ferrix is Marva's funeral, which the Empire is going to control extensively. That will be the final straw, and maybe Marva left something behind in her will or a message urging the people to stand up. The episode being titled Daughter of Ferrix was very appropriate and a wonderful tribute to an amazing character. Of course, aside from Cassian, who finds out at the end of the episode, the other immediate person who felt the impact of Marva's death the most is B2EMO. Despite being a droid, his grief broke my heart, and Fiona Shaw kind of teased this moment a couple of weeks ago when she said that B2 is basically a loyal dog who loves Marva more than anything in the world. That really came across on screen, so much so to the point that when it was time to go with his new owner Brasso, he wanted to stay behind at the Andor household. That was so touching. So now we move on to Narkina 5. Andor and Melshi have successfully escaped the Empire, and they get to Niamos by the end of the episode, where Andor left behind his case that contained his wealth, but most notably of all the items, Nemik's manifesto. Before getting there though, they had a run-in with the locals on Narkina, who eventually let them go, and they used their quad jumper to escape. The TUG B-13 quad jumper was the same vehicle Rey and Finn were about to use in The Force Awakens. As they were escaping Nima Outpost, that ship was destroyed by the First Order's attack, so they got to the Falcon instead. That little ship was the same model of quad jumper that we see in this episode, another sequel trilogy Easter egg. Back on Coruscant, Vel visits Clea to tell her about Marva's death. Luthen has gone off to Segra Milo, so he isn't there as Vel would have hoped. Vel risked a lot seeing Clea that day, especially without a meeting. She says she marked the sign, but it couldn't wait another day. This was an emergency. So we get our answer as to why Vel ends up on Ferrix in the last episode. As the trailers showed, she has to uphold her end of the deal to kill Cassian for Clea and Luthen, but obviously she's not going to. And in this scene, similar to the conversation between Loni Young and Luthen, the subject of sacrifice comes up once again. When Vel tells her that she gave up Aldhani, Clea gives her piece by saying how her sacrifice is daily. My favourite quote is when she said, "I have a constant blur of plates spinning and knives on the floor and needy panicked faces at the window, and you are but one of many." And that last part, the one of many part, is touched upon later by Saw Gerrera when he realises just how many spies Luthen has working for him. More on that in a moment, but back on Ferrix, Bix is still recovering from her torture. Like a PTSD-induced fever dream, she can still hear the haunting words of Dr. Gorst in her head. She's taken to another room of the hotel where she's shown a hologram of Anto Krieger. This is also the audience's first look at him. We finally now know what he looks like. Bix is asked if he is the contact, in other words Axis, who we know in reality is Luthen, but I think this is a great opportunity for Bix to lie and just say yes, frame Anto Krieger, who's already screwed on Spellhouse. But she breaks down in tears and we don't hear her give an answer, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So let's now cut to Luthen and Saw, because that exchange for me was the highlight of the entire episode. Stellan Skarsgård and Forrest Whitaker are two of the most experienced actors in this series, and you guys know just how much I love Saw Gerrera as a character, so this was a treat. Also, huge shout out to Two Tubes, who got a lot more screen time than ever before. And can we just take a moment to talk about Luthen's walking stick? I don't know about you guys, but to me, this looks like a weapon from a more civilized age, maybe a converted lightsaber. It's his walking stick, but do you think this might be a lightsaber hilt? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's move on. Saw has decided that he wants to join forces with Anto Kreegyr on Spellhouse. As I predicted in my episode 11 preview, Luthen is there to warn him. He tells Saw that the ISB knows about Kreegyr and Spellhouse, and that if Saw goes there, he's walking into a trap. At first, Saw is skeptical and thinks that Luthen might be ISB, but as Luthen explains, why would he be if he's warning him about the danger on Spellhouse? If he were ISB, he would just let him walk into the trap. Saw then realizes that Luthen's network of sources, spies, and undercover agents is bigger than he thought. Luthen even messes with him, telling him that Two Tubes is undercover as well. It's obviously just a joke, but Saw ends up realizing that Luthen saved his ass from certain capture, and that Anto Kreegyr and his men are a necessary sacrifice. They'd rather let the ISB think they have all the intel they need and play the long game. It's safer to have the ISB let their guard down and be smug than to risk further complications. But I suspect Anto Kreegyr's pilot, who as we know was captured in a previous episode, told the Empire about Saw's hideout on Segra Milo. And a hint to this is that as Luthen leaves, he's held by the tractor beam of an Imperial Arrestor patrol cruiser, and the Imperial officer informs him that they're aware of partisan activity in the region. Luthen disguises his ship's ID as an Alderaanian hullcraft, but his ultimate escape is freaking awesome and insane. We even see him use the Kyber blades of the Fondor against the TIE fighters, what's been dubbed on social media as the lightsaber ship. We're not done with Saw Gerrera in this season just yet, because there's one Segra Milo frame from the trailer that did not make it into this episode, and that is where Saw Gerrera's partisans had their guns pointed. Maybe Anto Kreegyr survives, he knows it's a trap, and goes to Segra Milo to blame Saw. We'll find out next week. Back on Coruscant, Vel visits Mon Mothma, whose daughter Leida has embraced traditional Chandrilan customs. Despite Mon Mothma's reluctance, she wants an arranged marriage, and when Vel asks Mon about it, she says it wasn't even Perrin's decision, it was Leida. She's a conformist to those practices, and as Mon puts it, she's embraced the elder. The divide between Mon Mothma and her family is growing, but what's really panicking Mon Mothma is the Empire looking into the missing 400 grand from her bank account, and it looks very suspicious. She tells Vel that Tay Volma opened her eyes to just how much trouble she's in, and then Mon says she's got a solution, but Leida walks in and we never find out. But I suspect this solution, which breaks Mon's heart, is that she's gonna accept Davos Golden's offer, and besides, she can feel a little bit less guilty because her daughter Leida actually does want to go through with it. Shit is really gonna hit the fan next week, ahead of season 2, I'm sure of it. Also on Coruscant, we now know how Cyril Khan ends up on Ferrix next week, as teased in the TV spots. His old Premor colleague, Linus Mosk, tells him about Marva's death. All of these characters assume that it's going to draw Cassian back to Ferrix, and so now, Cyril is preparing to be there to confront him. Cyril is sycophantic about Cassian, he's simply obsessed, he's everything Cyril isn't, and with his mum still undermining him, Cyril is on the way to Ferrix. So now let's talk about the ending, guys. Cassian secretly calls San Juan Freight from Nyamos, and when he recognizes Cassian's voice, he's curious to know where he is. Cassian tells him to tell Marva that he's on his way, and that he's thinking about her. When San Juan then breaks the news to him that Marva died, I think that moment was a turning point in Cassian's character development. He's going to mature a lot from this point on, because he no longer has a home or a mother to look out for him, like she did when he lived on Ferrix. Nothing is ever going to be the same again for Cassian. But it's also the moments that he decides he's going to take on the Empire and follow in his mother's rebellious footsteps, but this time be a full-on rebel for the cause. And the parallel to his death on Scarif in Rogue One was beautifully accomplished. He looked out to the serene sunset on the shore of Nyamos, and maybe now that's going to affect how we see Rogue One, and that's what Tony Gilroy said he wanted to achieve. Did Cassian find serenity and peace moments before he died, not just because he and Jyn Erso achieved what they did, but maybe because in his final moments he felt his mother would be proud of him, and was taken back to the day that he learned about her death, the day he decided to fight for the rebel cause, and in a weird way, he might have felt that she was with him in that moment, so it's a very gorgeous parallel. As I say guys, I love this episode. The only gripe I do have is it was way too short. I'm gonna give this one a solid 10 out of 10. And now, we look forward to the finale. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below guys. What did you think of Andor episode 11? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Why so or why not? Also, if you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and finally, just as a treat, I have a bonus video where I explore a very fun article about Clea. May the Force be with you always. So now let's move on, because today I came across a really interesting article from Culture Slate. Now this article at first just caught my attention because it's kind of clickbaity. They say, could Star Wars Andor be trolling fans with Clea? And they're ultimately talking about the fact that ever since this character was introduced, a lot of Star Wars fans saw similarities with Princess Leia. Now obviously they're not the same character by any stretch, but Clea might have been inspired by Leia, and in a big way, could Tony Gilroy basically be trolling fans by giving us a character very similar, even down to her name? So let's dive into this. They start by saying, every new character and event in a Star Wars televisual or cinematic event spawns an almost infinite amount of fan theories about what they could possibly mean. A cursory search online bombards the casual observer with everything from Darth Jar Jar to Jyn Erso being Rey's real mother, or from BB-8 being Force sensitive to Kylo Ren being Darth Vader. Now, I've got to admit, I've never heard BB-8 being Force sensitive. That's a very novel idea in my mind. If you guys have heard about this, let me know in the comments down below. They then say, I mean, at least Darth Jar Jar was funny, I suppose. The latest in these fan-based follies is surrounding a character in Star Wars Andor named Clea Marquis, specifically that she is actually a younger Leia Organa. Now, I'm just gonna say, guys, I think this is BS. I think it's more parallels between the characters. There's absolutely no way Clea is Leia. They don't even have the same accents, let alone background, backstory, parentage, whatever. And even if we don't know who Clea's parents are, it's definitely not Bail and Breha. So let's humour that for a moment. They're both strong, determined females in the Star Wars universe who are dedicated, driven, and loyal to the currently fledgling rebellion. What else? They both have dark hair. Clea sounds a bit like Clea. I kind of disagree with this. But as they say, that's all they've got. Now, despite the fact that these are two entirely different characters with different backstories and different accents, Core Worlds versus Outer Rim, the simple fact is that canonically, the timelines just don't match. Leia was born in 19 BBY, so she'd only be about 14 or 15 at this time. And Clea is clearly a bit older. She's good, but she's clearly not in her early teens. However, there is something admirable to be said for the ever-vigilant Star Wars fans out there, always seeing connections in the Force and hungry for Easter eggs. With a show as beautifully planned and expertly crafted as Andor, they certainly won't be going hungry. Maybe Disney knows this and is just out there baiting hooks. For now though, let's just enjoy that the Star Wars universe has another strong, independent female character that certainly takes no prisoners. She may play the role of Luthen Rael's assistant in his Coruscant gallery, but beneath that placid, friendly demeanor beats the heart of a rebel. So as I say guys, obviously they're different characters, but I think there's a very clear parody about Clea. They clearly base the name and the aesthetic of the character on Princess Leia. And I've got to say, fundamentally, they might be different in personality, but ultimately they've got, as they say, the heart of a rebel. So that's just something I picked up. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below. I'm so excited for what the finale holds. Everything is moving in a really exciting direction.